Everybody. Good morning, everybody. I am Penny Scribbins. Let me show you a face in the place here. Good morning. It's Monday. I know we're all kind of still waking up probably. Thank you for joining us though. And I welcome you to the Housing Transition Planning for People with Disabilities. This is our second session of 4. And I guess we can also remind people when the other 2 are at the end of the program. Today we are joined by myself, Penny Scribbins. We have lost 2 of our speakers. They are were Marianne Graham and Lisa, I forget Lisa's name, I'm sorry, who were part of our presentation, this particular presentation, and spoke about leasing. But Christina Boyard from MDOD is with us today, and she'll do the latter part of our presentation on leasing or leases. The Housing Transition Planning is an introduction for affordable housing in Maryland and housing opportunities for people with disabilities. It will describe the housing programs and eligibility criteria. The training will highlight the special considerations that persons with disabilities face when transitioning from institutions to living in the community. As a bit of housekeeping, please make sure to put any questions you have in the Q&A. We'll take them up at the end and answer directly to respondents along the way as appropriate. For logistics or technical issues, please drop information in the chat. I believe everybody's on mute. Is that correct, Christina? Except for the 2 of us, I think. Recording of this presentation will be uploaded to the MDOD YouTube channel for viewing. Participants who have registered on Zoom will be provided with copies of the PowerPoint presentations at the end of the session, and we usually get those out within a couple of days. Any questions to start? Do I need to do anything, Christina, to get it on its way? The PowerPoint? Christina, are you there?
Hey Penny, it's Chelsea. I'm not sure what's going on. I told Christina she's not logged in anymore. So
okay.
I don't know what happened. And I don't have the PowerPoint up. I'm gonna have to.
Oh, she just left? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. So give me 1 second because I don't have the PowerPoint ready to go.
Okay. Hold tight, everybody.
Do you have the PowerPoint up, Penny?
I don't have it up on this screen, no, but I do have it in my documents. So I go in. Well,
you want to pull it up? Remember we went through this?
I know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I go into my files, right?
Yep.
And
go to share screen first. That's it. So open it up.
Go to that first. Okay. Sorry. Share screen. Got it. Click that. Okay. And then what's next?
Do you have the PowerPoint open?
Well, should I do that first? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's the one. Do you see it?
I don't.
Okay.
So click share screen.
So I should open it, right?
Yes.
Okay, I opened it, go back to shared screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And hit, okay, hit the arrow again. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I thought I opened it.
There you go. All right, double click on that.
Open.
Yep, click open.
There we go. Do you see it now?
Not yet.
You see the screen, right?
So yeah, it's frozen. So I don't know
Okay.
why. Okay, so try to stop sharing, Penny, and then reshare.
Okay. Okay. All right. So just don't hit share anymore, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
Is this the right screen, Penny?
This is,
Okay. Yep. There you go.
there I go. Okay.
So you can use the arrows at the bottom to advance it. Okay.
Okay. At the bottom on the right hand or as part of
Left-hand
this.
side. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Over here, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me a minute.
I've got the PowerPoint showing, so I don't think it'll let her do it. I'll do it.
Okay. You got it now,
Yeah.
Christina? Oh, you're
Yeah.
back.
I'm back.
You're back. You're back. All right. Okay, I got to get back in again.
Penny, I think you went back on mute.
Okay.
There you
we're ready. Okay, good. All
All
right.
right.
Okay, well, we're going to start out with a question here. Have you used any of the materials so far with any of your clients? And if you don't have a copy of My Own Front Door, you certainly can download that from the MDOD website. And I believe that's actually at the bottom of that particular slide. Okay, there's also a book on case management training, and it just offers a guide. Some of it may be slightly dated because we wrote it quite a while ago. And I know there's been some changes with getting the the new ID actually from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and some people have told me that they need to go in person to get it. I certainly did. But when COVID hit, they were making other arrangements. So some of the information may be a little dated, but just double check on that. Okay. Okay, people are giving some feedback on that. Okay, next slide. This is we flashed by it, but my own front door, that's the front of the manual that we've used. And go ahead. It's a handbook designed to assist persons with disabilities. I want to move this over. We designed this book so it would be a help for people to look at and review, get training on for case managers, as well as offering some beginning steps for people that are thinking about moving into independent housing in the community. The handbook makes you think about and plan, learn about the resources, search. Sometimes people are looking for places to live that may or may not be within our programs. And then to decide what your preferences and your needs are. Sometimes it's better to know what those items are before you actually start looking around, so that you're not looking at places that you're not going to be able to get your resources connected to you very easily. There's no transportation. You don't have your family to assist you if you are depending on them to help you out once you get moved in. So you want to make sure that those things are looked at and evaluated, as well as, can you afford it, which is a big part as well. The tenant training is offered to the case managers and designated consultants certified to conduct the training, and that's what this is part of. This is the second session for that. Go ahead. How many times have you moved as an adult? Do you just want to put it in the chat? And how many times have you signed a lease? I found that some of the folks that have attended our training, nobody's ever signed a lease, or I've found people that have moved 6, 7 times or more. 6 times, Daniel, that's a 5, 2, 8 times. Seeing a lot of that there. 3 moves, 7, okay. So, and I'm sure people are including when you moved from home to college, or moved for a job, or moved because there were other opportunities in other places. So good. So we have people that are experienced at this. Great. So you might remember that whole experience for yourself, and how you needed to be on top of some of the items that were in the lease to make sure those were going to be things that you could adhere to with a lot of ease, or at least put it into your daily activities with maintaining the lease requirements. Okay. The handbook offers tools to support persons with disabilities as they move from where they're currently located into independent housing, assessing housing readiness and eligibility for the subsidy. And sometimes that involves certainly family and team members, or whoever's working with that person in the beginning. It could be that they're moving from a facility, so you might want to work with the treatment team. nurses, occupational and physical therapists, just to make sure that this is a good move for that person, or to evaluate whether it's a good move or not. And certainly talk about those preferences. If they're moving, do they need an aide? Do they prefer a roommate? Are they going to be okay living by themselves? And what things might need to be in place for them to be able to live independently. You're going to want to go over their income, and if they're waiting on SSI or SSDI to pay their ongoing expenses, find out where they are in that process. I know I've worked with people that have moved in and no income, but the plan was this to follow up with their appeals or any other things that maybe an attorney can help with. But you're going to look at the rent, the utilities, the other expenses, and this is part of that assessment that you do with your client. What are your housing needs? Again, kind of finding out what people's preferences are. How to locate affordable and safe, accessible housing. You're going to be looking at the housing and the services that are located in that area, making sure that they're able to get to them easily or get connected with new services, which is the case sometimes when people are moving out of the county that they currently live in, or even the neighborhood that they received a lot of services and need to know whether they can reestablish those relationships with possibly a new provider. And developing a plan to assist with filing and referring, applying for the housing unit, and maintaining contact with, if you apply for HUD 811, with MDOD staff, Christina Boyard. I believe you can go in now, and you've been able to go in and actually make changes online. Is that correct, Christina? I know we don't have social serve anymore. We have a new way of getting referrals in, but I'm assuming that they can go back and the case manager can go back in and make changes as the person's referred, and there might be situations that change along the way. Okay, go ahead. Again, this is a list of housing needs or preferences, things you might talk about as you go along. Certainly wheelchair accessible. Sometimes, just getting in and out of the building is difficult. We've had things, I know when we first started the program where we had to look at the width of the doors, the turnaround in bathrooms and kitchens, making sure that people can get in and out of the unit easily, and pointing out some of the things that person might need while they are a tenant there. Sometimes it's parking, or knowing, where public transportation is, and then of course home modifications, which are reasonable accommodations that might be made before and possibly during that move-in process, because sometimes you need to use it before you can actually see the items or the adjustments that you need to make after you get moved in. If the person plans to have a pet, find out what they need to do to have a emotional support animal, or considering that actually before they move in. And then the other thing is there are lots of things that change when a person moves into a new community, especially a new county. They have to change their addresses for food stamps, for any other DSS services. If they get TDAP, that's another change. And there might be differences in the amount of money or benefit that the person might get locally. So those all need to be taken into consideration as well. Go ahead. this is a list that I'm sure you keep close to your files, and a list of things that you're going to need, or certainly let the new referral or the new tenant to be put these items together. And I know if you were kind of seasoned as this, you've heard the things of, it's in my grandmother's shoebox in the back of her house. It's in a house that I lived in 2 years ago. The police took my information and I never got it back. And they haven't made any steps, or have been unable to make those steps to acquire new ones, or at least reapply, for a bank card, for a new ID if they've lost that. Certainly birth certificates are very handy, so that might be something to focus in on before the person moves in. This is all information that's going to be needed repeatedly, whether it be they move in, they have all their information, but they need to hold on to that and keep a file or a folder, something where, and I even, suggest, I said, a shoebox, some kind of secure place where they know it's not going to get wet. Like, leaving it in the kitchen on the counter might not be the best place to leave it, but maybe a drawer that's pretty dry, stays dry, and they could stick it in there. Some people have said that's what they've used a couple of the drawers of the kitchen for, but being able to access it, because in a year or less, they're going to have a recertification and all those documents are going to be needed again. They will be updating their bank account and, within that 30 days of their review. But it's also good to have a lot of these things handy, so they may need them at certain times, especially if they're going into new services. But just take a look at that list and make sure that you really either eyeball the information. It's not that people are telling you, an untruth, but sometimes they're not sure where it's at and they don't need it that day, so they forget about it. And then, 3 months later, you're looking for the birth certificate and can't seem to put your hands on it. So it's always good to if you keep copies for people. Sometimes, after they move in independently, there's not a real push to keep copies of some of that information, because I know case managers sometimes do for folks, and or with their permission, of course, but they might even want to keep it with a family member that they trust. Okay. Developing a budget. You look at all of the income coming in, where's all your money coming from. If there's VA benefits, employment, any kind of employment, financial assistance, that's pretty regular. And I think there's if there's any income from like a pension or interest, inheritance, anything that they know that's regularly going to be a part of their monthly income coming in, all those sources need to be added in, and be able to, if you have documentation on those, you'll have that to bring to get your portion of the rent assessed. Okay, next things. And by the way, that list is not finite. There might be other pockets of money that are for that particular person, may come up every month, but finding out what those are, because what you're trying to do is eliminate those surprises when they come and they say, well, your bank account is registering $100 a month from an unknown source, but it seems to show up on the 10th of every month. And, finding out what that is, and making adjustments for it in their budget. There's several charts and tools in the handbook. The other thing is I know a lot of our folks, when they first move in, there's lots of move-in expenses, just gathering things for the bedroom, the bath, the kitchen, essential things. So it's good to have a pot and pan to kind of cook with, and dishes to eat, and use for storage. And then, your bedroom, trying to make sure that you have a bed and the bedding that you need to go with it. Something for the bath, a towel, washcloth, maybe soap, but they're not going to be ongoing costs. So that might be another thing to start saving for, so that they have money to buy a trash can, money to buy, cleaning supplies. And like I said, these might not be items that'll come up certainly every month, but those initial expenses sometimes deplete what they thought was going to be going for their utility turn on, and they're finding out that they don't have enough money for that. So sometimes those first couple of months are pretty eye-opening for some of the folks that do move in. I didn't know I was going to have to pay all this, because they have set in their mind what it is it's going to be costly for them in the month that they move in. Of course, for any subsidy, being eligible for those. And then again, it's the tenants paying 30% of their income for rent, and along with the utility allowance. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But knowing what your monthly expenses are, getting them to tell you what it is that they anticipate needing to pay for every month. At the bottom, there's a website called the Consumer Financial Bureau, or it's a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And they offer a lot of tips and tools in their booklets and their handbooks. And then I put down the website for that. And I think the next slide shows you a little bit of their materials. These are some of the booklets. These are very colorful, as you can see. The print is big if you haven't been aware of this as a resource. This is a federal program. It's one that came about with Senator Warren, and her group worked on making sure that there was a national consumer agency, that consumers who were caught up in the mortgage crisis, where they bought or were assessed for an amount for a new house that they obviously couldn't afford just based on their income and their resources. And of course, it being with a variable interest rate, they weren't able to keep up with those payments, and a lot of people had to be foreclosed. So this opportunity with this agency came about due to people being informed in writing, not just some casual conversation. So this really puts down some of the essential elements of putting together a budget, making sure you have a plan, and then what to do about some of the things you need to take care of, like you have creditors that you need to talk to, or figure out a plan to pay off your bill, how to get credit, how to get your credit increased so that you are a good risk. And credit also impacts your turn-on fee for your gas and electric. If you didn't know that, but a lot of things now, they do check your credit score. I even think for some job applications, they do the same thing, just to see if you're compromised with other things that may or may not impact your position. So take a look at those. They're free pamphlets. I can help you get them if you need help. They have specific booklets for persons with disabilities, people that have been incarcerated. I know those are the two I know. And I know they have a couple of other populations that they write some of these materials for. So they really kind of help you answer and also take in some of that information. Okay, great. We can definitely send more of that out to you. And everything is free with them. So this is a little bit more about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, okay? The other good thing, and it's listed here, there's companion guides there, even if you run a group, and I do actually with an RP program in Anne Arundel County, we have a financial literacy group that actually uses a lot of their tools, because in the booklet, they have these very readable print and very easy to do exercises for just knowing what your income is. How much do you bring in a month? And then, knowing what goes out and what do you have to pay? I work with a group that we use now. It's NOW. I've seen it other places, but it stands for needs, wants, and obligations. So needs, obligations, and wants. And it really, yes. Do you see that in the chat that they have the Spanish and English and other languages? Actually, they have redone a lot of their booklets to really be a lot more inclusive of many populations that speak a different language. But they're always handy, and your client can actually Xerox the charts that they have in there. But like I said, if you run a group, they even give you group ideas, tasks, things to work on actually. And rather than talking to people about it, you get them involved. It's their budget, it's their plan, it's their money. And what do they want to do with it so they can maintain their unit? Okay, next slide. Definitely check their website out. Oh, great. This is a little bit of that information concerning, I think we have a couple slides on this, but the tenant pays 30% of their income toward their rent, which includes the utility allowance. I believe if you attended our session last week, we talked about how that splits out so that the amount that's 30% could be a figure like 270, but only 165 goes to the rent. And then the other is the utility allowance that's estimated pretty much closely estimated to what the person will be paying in their regular gas and electric bill. And like I said in the beginning, they may have that, I don't call it a balloon payment, but it's that turn on cost that could be budgeted over 5 or 6 months or less. It could be that that's paid up and then they start paying their monthly bill within a month or so of being at the moving in. Sometimes the client or the tenant is a little confused about how that's going to work. We've had tenants, I think, call all of us, Chelsea and Christina, about where they're going to get the check to pay the utilities and not realizing that only a portion of their total 30% goes to the rent, paying the rent, but the other part that's left goes toward paying utility bills. And at times, for a variety of reasons, people like it really warm in their unit when it's cold outside, and they may push the heat up. Same with air conditioning, because they may be spending more time in their unit than somebody that's working 40 or 50 hours a week, and they just readjust their thermometer. So that's something, to have a discussion about. I think you know, that I'm just trying to think about, and I was doing this when I was reviewing the slides, that, you know, these are certain things sometimes that pop up right in the beginning. And they'll be feeling like, gosh, I'm off to an unsteady start, you know, with getting in and getting situated. But I think if people go back over, and I know you're hearing some things in our slides, like they mentioned that last week, but sometimes it's good to hear it a couple of times before it kind of really sinks in. Or you may not have had a client or a new tenant that's had these problems because they had family, they had people that were going over those things with them, you know, off to the side and not necessarily in front of their case manager. But we do have lots of folks that still have some confusion about it. That's why we ask the question even of our participants about how many times have you signed a lease? Have you read all that fine print? Do you know what it means? Do you know what you're responsible for? We'll get more into the lease, you know, in our second half of our presentation today. And then understanding that their rental subsidy, and I know we went over this last week about the differences between the project-based and tenant-based. There's different rules and privileges. I don't know that I need to go through a long explanation of it, but if you do have questions about it, please put them in the Q&A. Project-based, again, is stays with the unit. The subsidy stays with the unit, or definitely within that development. They may move the unit around because of the needs of the person utilizing that subsidy, like if they need to have a first floor and the unit that was first used was on the second floor. And then tenant-based is a Section 8 voucher, which they can apply for even if they're getting HUD 811 or one of the other subsidies that we are currently monitoring, or any other kind of subsidy that might come through directly through the housing authority. I don't see any questions. I think we can move on. There's a little blurb about how, what I was speaking about, the total income for, this is Grace. She has a 1-bedroom unit. She gets $783 a month. 30% of that income is $235. Her utility allowance is $75. And again, anything over that $75, she would be needing to pay it out of her regular monthly income. It wouldn't be an allowance. And then 30% of her rent is $235. So those two figures together is totals. Yeah, I see how they did that. So the monthly rent is $160 and the total utility allowance is $75. So that comes to $235. Does everybody see how you get that? It's the latter two figures, 75 and 160, that gets to that 30% of their income. And I always remind them it's 30% of your income, not 30% of the rent. Okay. Is everybody on the same page with that? Any questions about that? Just put them in the Q&A. So the rent's paid directly to the owner. And we recently, I just want to highlight something. Okay. I don't know, Chris, we're still investigating it, but there seems to be fees that may or may not be attached each month to the person paying their rent. They may be actually charged for putting it through another contractor that takes care of the bills or the, you know, the rent, and sends out notices of shortage or non-payment or whatever. So sometimes you're working with a second party that's taking care of that part of the property management's responsibilities. And sometimes there's been fees assessed that I didn't know about until this year, that they were even, you know, fees being charged, which for somebody that's making like Grace $783 a month and having $10 or $15 or less taken out each month, that adds up, which could be spent on food or even switching it over to something else that they need in the unit that, you know, they might not be able to afford because of that accumulation of fees. So we're looking into that, I think, a little more to make sure that that's really what it's going toward. Next slide. This is just there's checkoff lists actually in the booklet on, you know, the kinds of things that the person might be looking at when they're, you know, touring around or going to see a couple of these units that they may be eligible for through the HUD 811. So sometimes it's good to go at different times of the day to see what it looks like, what it feels like. Are there a lot of people out? Are there people just hanging around and don't really live in the unit they're hanging around at? You know, these are things that have come up later, so I just want to make sure that people feel safe and or as safe as they can be, and noting where bus stops are, where shopping might be. So all those things. And then the handbook also talks about just where their basic needs can be accessed and how far away. Even to take a look at where there's one of those quick clinics, like if there's a Walgreens or a CVS that has a clinic inside of their store. Sometimes that's, you know, needed, especially if there's cuts or a fall or something that they can easily take care of in a clinic versus a hospital emergency room. And then, you know, looking around to see that they can, I think it lists here whether they can reach the cupboards, use the stove, make sure that the knobs are reachable. The exhaust and the light above the stove can be accessed if they have one. Can they clean the unit? Are they able to take their own trash out? Can they get in and out of the bathtub? And then we've had some reasonable accommodations in bedroom closets because somebody in a wheelchair or unable to stand for very long might not be able to hang up their items and, you know, on rods that are, you know, all the way to the ceiling. And so those need to be adjusted sometimes. Next slide, I think. I guess the next thing is really the decision time after you've assessed, done that assessment with the person. And there's lots of questions in there that may be really, you know, sensitive, or the person's not wanting to talk about it, or they really bring it out front and give, you know, make sure that you are aware that this is something that would not be acceptable for that person. So, you know, to eliminate some option, you know, some choices that may or may not be the best for that person, but at least you're getting that out in the open and talking about it. So it does give you lots of information, and that for probably the first 20 or 30 pages of the booklet are about prior to moving in, prior to making that decision about where you're going to live. I think those are kind of self-explanatory. I think Chelsea has told us, I'm sorry, Christina has told us that when working with property managers, it can take a couple months for the person to actually move in. I'm sure you know that the sooner that the person is leased up and in the unit, the sooner they're gonna, the property manager and certainly the landlord will get their you know, payment for the rent. Their worst fear is empty units that aren't generating income, to pay their bills. So it's better for everybody to get moved in, unless this isn't a good choice for that person. So, but I think it takes about that long, but the more preparation that's put into getting those documents, making sure the person is available to go through and take a look at the unit, because they may see some things that aren't going to be workable for them. And then you kind of know those things up front rather than moving in and having to make a lot of adjustments. So kind of keeping a list of things in mind of what the person is asking or requesting or will be needing, and making sure that you go back and take a look at what's being offered by the unit. By the property manager, but that the unit is acceptable. Okay. This really is a list that may go back to different times throughout the person's tenancy. May not even be something that that you're going to bring up right in the beginning, but things happen, life happens, as we all know, and there may be things that come up that were unexpected or expected, but when we weren't sure how they would work out, so it wasn't a big priority when they first moved in. But there could be ongoing issues, how people interact with the property management office to get things taken care of, changes within that person's family, and the need for maybe a son or a daughter to be moving in because they're just getting out of foster care. Knowing how we can accommodate that or not. Sometimes we're not able to do that. Other times we have been. I think we've added different and taken off this list some agencies that we currently use and certainly refer people to. You may have lists of places that that in your area or your county, they're good advocates. And sometimes I put down the community action agencies. Sometimes they are really helpful. They're very active. They're on, business boards that are located within the city, like in Prince George's County, or Frederick, I know, is a very active one. Montgomery County is another one. And they do a lot of charitable things as well as provide housing sometimes. Or they kind of are an extra arm actually for somebody that may not be familiar with a new county's, for the person moving in, that new county and all their resources, but that local community action might be the place to kind of make some contact with, so that you can get an idea of what available resources are in that county for your client to use. Sometimes we're at a loss because we don't deal with that county that the person's moving to. So look for agencies within that county that can provide you with lists of food pantries, local shelters, places to get help with energy assistance. I found places where they do furniture donations. They can help people at times with getting the furniture to the unit, which is sometimes a problem. But just different things come up as communities are faced with some of these things with a larger group of folks, and not necessarily a person with disability, but just needs help. So keep adding to that list. If you have good resources and that our folks might be able to utilize them, we certainly can add to them. So definitely send an email our way. Okay. I think probably most of the people in our audience today very aware of persons with disabilities having the right to reasonable accommodations. And they could be anything. It could be visible accommodation where we've seen ramps or different ways to get into a unit and get out of a unit safely. Maybe that they've had to move their parking spot to the front of the building that they're living in and not a couple blocks down where there's handicap parking, but nothing in front of the building where they have people that have a disability that keeps them in a wheelchair, or they need to use the wheelchair to get back and forth, and a couple blocks away for a parking space, or it's a little extreme. Always decisions can be appealed. We've put in appeals for people, especially when there may be a lingering question about credit or a legal problem. It's always good to kind of put that in and see whether the property manager and the landlord are willing to make some adjustments, knowing that somebody's getting off probation in 2 months. Maybe that person would be free and clear of those legal obligations before they move in. So don't necessarily think that one particular mark on someone's record, whether it be their credit or their criminal background or any other thing that kind of flashes a red light, is not considered. And they can weigh that individually for that person. And lots of times, the property manager and the landlord, they're really able to work. They're very accommodating. I haven't really met anybody that's had a problem getting an accommodation that's really in need of it. Sometimes the time it gets in, though, takes a little bit, such as grab bars, because they don't either have the position where they need to be put, or the tenant wasn't there at the time that somebody was ready to do it. So sometimes it's the back and forth that takes a little time. Go ahead. I know that Christina's going to emphasize, but reading that lease, going through it, making sure that the tenant knows what's in the lease and what impacts them, their guests, their tenancy, even to take a look at what it takes to get out of the lease. What if I need to move in the middle of that year that I've signed up for? What happens? Am I going to be charged for the rest of the lease? And in many cases, you're not, because they may be able to lease that unit up within 30 days that you're moving out, and they're going to be moving someone new in, unless there's major repairs that need to be done to the unit. But knowing how to sustain their tenancy, how to be a good neighbor. As I tell people all the time, there's no wrong questions. There's no questions that you might have that you think are petty, or nobody has that happen to them. Well, you'd be surprised. I'm sure you know that. It could be that question actually generates a change in a policy, or the way the property management does business on a particular item that you've had problems with. And they like to know when things are broken, or need repair, whether it's in their unit or in the hallway. So be aware of that. I guess we can handle the next. These are, I guess, true or false. Tenant does not have to pay their rent if hospitalization or in rehab for 30 days or more. Is that true or false? Your tenant doesn't have to pay their rent if hospitalization or rehab, or in rehab for 30 days or more. It is false. Even if they're out of the unit for 30 days or more, actually, we have an addendum actually to the lease that sometimes our property managers know about, or we bring it to their attention during that tenant training period. That I like my tenants that I'm working with to sign it and know they have 180 days being out of the unit, especially if they're hospitalized or in rehab for a while, because we've had people that have fallen and broke their hip, needed to go to rehab for 6 weeks. But as long as the unit's paid for with their utilities and their rent, they will not be taking any new people. They're not going to move things out and move someone else in there while they're, you know, in the hospital or rehab. The second thing is, can the tenant, if they're away for 30 days, sublet to a friend if allowed, and allowed as a special situation? Yep. Big false. A lot of people are answering false. They cannot sublet, even if, you know, they can't sublet. I mean, it's a fast and strict rule, because that person has not been kind of vetted for that particular unit. The property manager doesn't know them. They're not on the lease. And anyone not on the lease should not be living permanently in that unit, including children. They need to know who is living permanently in the unit, even if that changes. Okay, we've had these situations come up, by the way, so we're not putting out examples without a little bit of history to some of these. Go ahead. So it's false for both. Again, Christina's going to go over a lot of this, but just, you know, a little blurb on the lease. It's a contract, property manager and tenant. Read all the fine print. I mean, I think, you know, our new tenants, they're a little overwhelmed with all the paperwork that they get from lots of different sources, and how to put it all together. What's most important for me to know right now? What should I take and look at a little bit later? You know, because they get bills they're not sure are correct or understanding them quite yet. There may be wrong information that the property management has. And then, you know, from time to time, that person may go on and work other places within that company, and they don't come back to the same development, and they have a new person to deal with. So the tenant's getting oriented to that sometimes 6 months down the road. So anyway, I know Christina's going to go through that. Go ahead. Again, these were just things that, you know, to just be aware of. Sometimes you cover them, you know, because the tenant is bringing up these issues. What about renter's insurance? How do I pay my bills? Something as simple as opening up a bank account. Or how is it that I do pay my rent? Because usually I use a money order, but we have a drop box. I mean, every property management company that I have come in contact with, they have different ways of the person paying their rent, paying it, you know, on time. Sometimes we've had to have accommodations, by the way, when the person doesn't get paid their benefits until the 3rd of the month, and they're late after the 1st of the month. So there needs to be a discussion about that, because there's no possible way for them to have a head payment, like a 30-day ahead payment in there, to be on time by the 1st. So it would have to be the 3rd. So there's been some accommodations that we've been able to work out. Go ahead. A little hand holding there, because it's always good when you have the property manager and the tenant having a relationship where they are at least able to communicate Sometimes just going in and introducing yourself, that might be the first meeting. You're not asking for anything, but you just want to know what they look like, what their hours might be, what things to bring to their attention, and who else would be involved in making decisions about fixing something, or who should I alert. So it may not just be the property manager that's involved in that. But getting them to know you and you to know them, and then because it helps a little bit when there are some things that need to be taken care of, and they may be difficult, they may be a little awkward later on, but once you establish who you are and what you're doing and you like it there, you know, are trying to make sure that you know what all the rules and regs are, this is a good time to kind of do that engagement, and certainly encourage your tenant to be a part of that, you know, because they're building relationships as well. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Any questions, just put them in the Q&A.
All right. Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to go over the sections for the tenant's rights and responsibilities when it comes to a lease signing. So just to reiterate some of the things that Penny's already gone over this morning, a lease is a legally binding contract. It's a contract between the tenant and the landlord. There will be sections in there that define the tenant's rights and responsibilities. It's going to outline the amount of rent that's due. For this particular program, it will also spell out the portion of rent that's paid by the program. It will also let you know the tenant's portion of the utilities that must be paid. It will give you the time of the month that it's due. This program, again, there are no late fees, but it will also spell out that information as well. It will give you information about the landlord's rights and responsibilities as well. There are certain circumstances where the lease can be broken. The lease will tell you the time frame that needs to be given if you're giving notice to move out, and what those circumstances are for when the lease can be broken and why. We always encourage you to go over the lease before they sign it. There's a copy of the Section 811 lease on our website, but we can include that as a document along with this PowerPoint at the end of the presentation, or when we send out the presentation, so that everybody can have that lease ahead of time so that you know what it's going to say. We encourage reading it ahead of time because if anybody's gone with a person, or if you've gone to a lease signing on your own, that process can go pretty quick. They try to put a lot of information in a very short amount of time. So try to have your clients read that ahead of time. Okay, so if everybody could answer in the chat, how old were you when you signed your first lease? I see a lot of A's, a lot of folks between 18 and 25 signing their first lease. All right. So on the day of lease signing, we encourage everybody to ask to get a copy of that lease. I've seen several properties give a little folder with information about the property and the community, things including emergency numbers, numbers to local agencies that they might find helpful, as well as information about how to pay their rent online, or how to pay their rent in general, information about the laundry room if there's one on site, things like that. So if they don't give you a folder, I would tell you, make sure your client has something to put a copy of that lease in so that they know where to find it. Case managers can also ask for a copy of the lease if you want to have that to put in their file, just in case your client happens to lose their copy. It's always good to have that just to make sure that you can see what's spelled out and know the rules and the regulations in each of the property. On the day of lease signing, your client's also going to be asked to inspect the unit. And there is a move-in, move-out inspection form that's specific to the Section 811 program. Please make sure that your clients have that unit inspected before they move in. It's very, very important. Checking for damages that might be in the property. Oh, did I go ahead? I did. I'm sorry. I went to the next screen and I'm not even. Does the tenant have the correct lease? Making sure that their lease has their name, their address, their apartment number, things like that. Did they sign the Section 811 lease? Making sure that they actually have the 811 lease and not the property's lease for other programs or for other tenants. Making sure that they also have that 180-day addendum for leave of absence for medical reasons, making sure that that is signed and part of their lease. Now it's the inspection. So making sure that they inspect their unit prior to signing that lease, checking for damages, taking pictures of anything that they might see that needs to be fixed by the property. Lots of things could happen before someone moves in. I think we talked about this last week. Sometimes finishing little repairs could, ding a countertop or, put a little hole in the drywall and any of those things, making sure that the appliances work and run. Just take an opportunity to go through those things and make sure all that's working. And on that move-in, move-out inspection form, there is a little chart on there where they can write those things down and document when they told the property manager, and then follow up and make sure that they know that it's been fixed and things like that. So we can send out a copy of that as well if everybody would like. The property manager should provide you with that checklist, but like I said, I know that it's on the one that's used for the 811 program, so you'll already have a copy of that. The community rules or the lease may also show how to request repairs. There should be a number to the maintenance to report something. There may even be an online portal where you can go in and request those repairs. That will also be outlined in the community rules. And if they, like I said, if they give out a folder, hopefully all of that information will be contained in one area. That lease is going to have the effective date of when the lease starts. It should tell you how long the lease will be for. It should be for 1 year. The tenant's going to receive the keys, and that will be the automatic the sign that you have possession, or the client your client has possession of the unit. As soon as they receive the keys, that's when they are in possession of the unit. The lease is going to tell if there's a washer and dryer rental fee, if they have that option to have that in the unit, the lease will spell out how much that fee is. And that can vary from property to property. Just as a little side note, some properties do not charge a rental fee, some do not have that option at all. And you have to use the on-site laundry room, or you can go off-site to another laundromat. But if they are going to rent a washer and dryer, it will be in the lease, and it is their responsibility to make sure that they're paying that additional fee outside of the 30% for rent and utilities. If for some reason there is a change in income, please make sure to let your clients know that they need to report that information immediately. It's most of the properties will tell you it is the lease will tell you that it's around a $200 a month difference. We encourage you to tell the property manager at any time. I also want to point out, if you have folks that are coming out of a nursing facility that only get the $30 or the $60 a month, then once they get into the community, they're going to get their full SSI or SSDI. So please make sure that they report that change in income to the property manager, because if a couple months go by and the property manager is, looking at some documents and finds out that their income changed 3 months ago, they will do a recalculation, and the individual is going to owe that amount from 3 months ago, plus currently. So even if the income decreases, even if it increases, always report that information. Like I said, it's usually around $200 or more that it should be reported, but I would say go to the property manager and report it anyway. It's up to them to say, okay, let's do a recalculation of your rent. I would even say make sure that you have it in writing so that they can't say you didn't report it. It's always good to have copies of what you report, and so you can have a paper trail. Paying rent. Does the tenant have a plan for paying rent on time? Are they going to pay online? Are they going to pay by money order? Penny had talked about this a little bit ago, that there are several properties that have online portals where you can pay online. And yes, they are going to have a fee. There's usually a service fee to do that, just like many of us have probably seen if you pay online for certain companies. I know BG&E does a service fee. There are some other companies that will do that as well. Sometimes it will vary depending on how you're paying. If you're paying with a debit card or like a checking account, it may be less than if you're going to pay with like a Visa or a MasterCard. I know that some people are paying by a check. I would also tell you to make sure that you talk to them about bounce checks, because I've seen at some of the properties where individuals will bounce a check or stop payment on a check, which then kind of throws a wrench in the plan as far as continuing to pay with a check, because the property may have a policy, which should be in their lease or the community rules, about paying with a check. And if the check bounces, they will not allow you to pay with a check for 6 months. And so then what do? Then you're going to have a backup plan for either, like I said, paying online if that's an option, or paying by money order. How easy is it for them to pay with that check or money order? Can they take it to the office? Is there a drop box? Does it have to be, hand it right to the leasing office and get a copy, or to get a receipt that they've paid? Things like that. So have all those types of conversations and know the answers to those things. There are no fees for late payments for the Section 811 program. What I will tell you real quick about that is a lot of those things are computer generated. So it could happen that your client will get a notice on their door that that they have a late payment, that it's 5 days, 10 days old. That's just, it's just computer generated. The property managers typically do not have access to control those letters spitting out. So if it happens, I'm not telling you to ignore the situation. There won't be a late fee, but just take it into consideration that you could see those notes. You could also see late fees on the ledger if they get a copy of the ledger. If they are not removed, you are more than welcome to reach out to myself or Chelsea. Let us know, and we'll kind of intervene and advocate on your client's behalf to make sure that those fees get reversed and come off of their account. Okay. I know one of the hardest things for some of tenants is knowing that they are responsible for other members in their household. So if your client is the head of household, the leaseholder, just know that they are responsible for other members of their household. They are also responsible for the behaviors of their guests when they come to visit. But if there are other members in the household, are they on the lease? Like Penny said, making sure that all of those people that are living in the unit, making sure that they're on the lease so that they're covered. When can somebody be added to the lease? Typically, it's after a year of being at the property. Changes can be made to to the lease, that person needs to go through a background check. Everybody that's on the lease, 18 or older, is going to go through a background check. If a child is added to the lease, they're going to need birth certificate, social security card, things like that. If it's somebody 18 or older and they have income, is that going to affect the eligibility of the household for the program? Because that will be a factor in continuing eligibility. Every household has to be within that 30% of the area median income for the program to remain eligible to receive the subsidy for the program. So making sure that those things, the eligibility and income, custody, if someone receives custody of a minor, having the court documentation to add them to the lease. If someone has a child, going into the leasing office and adding that individual, adding the new baby onto the lease, making sure that you have the social security card, birth certificate, all of those types of things, because it will change household composition and things like that, and they need to be added to the lease. Tenants should be aware that each year there is a recertification. So usually if the property is, on track, they're going to start this about 90 days ahead of time. And they're going to recollect information such as, income, bank statements. It's not typical that they ask for social security cards or IDs or anything like that, but they will definitely ask for updated award letters, verifying income and bank statements and things like that. And I'm going to stop real quick and tell you that there's usually a chance that there's going to be a change in the utility allowance, because typically after a year or each year, the property they reconfigure the utility allowance based on usage throughout the property and square footage and HUD guidance and things like that. So I can almost guarantee when that utility allowance gets changed, whether it goes up or down, the property, they're going to send out a letter. It's going to go on everybody's door. And the bottom line is, as long as the individual is paying 30% of their income for rent and utilities. So the slide that Penny had in the previous section, it was 783 and 30% was 235. And so 160 was rent, 75 was the utility allowance. Let's say it's time for that recertification, and now the utility allowance goes down to 70, which means that rent will be 185. No, I'm sorry. Now my math is off. So 70, and it'll go up to 165. So it could fluctuate, but at the end of the day, as long as they're paying 235 for rent and a portion of the utilities, they should be good to go. If it for some reason it becomes higher than that, just either to have a conversation with the property manager to make sure it was calculated correctly, or reach out to myself or Chelsea and we can help with that. I know Penny talked about having a shoebox or something available to keep all of your documents together. Shoebox, a folder, a safe, any of those things to make sure that all of those important documents are in one place and can be found quickly. Giving a copy to your support planner or your case manager, or maybe giving a copy to your family, a family member or a friend that you trust, just so that somebody else has a copy of those documents so that you know where they are and you have access to them. Okay, so true or false? And you can just answer in the chat. A landlord can change the locks and place a tenant's personal belongings on the street if they don't move out by the notice to vacate date. All right. So I saw a lot of falses. That is actually correct. So it is false that they cannot go and change the locks and place your things out. If you receive a notice to vacate, if your client receives a notice to vacate, that's the first step. That's the first step in the process of having individuals have the opportunity to move out before it goes to court, before it becomes an eviction. If the individual, so Audrey would go to court for tenant holding over, right? So if the individual does not vacate, yes, it would go to court for the individual holding over on the unit. And then that determination would be made as far as who was in the right. You know, are they going to determine if in favor of the tenant? Are they is the court going to rule in favor of the landlord? Those things could go back and forth. If it is in favor of the landlord, then the eviction would be scheduled. In some cases, if it's I'm going to back up and use a different example. If it's a case where it's multiple lease violations and the individual is given a notice to vacate, I would say that if this is something that can't be appealed, then it is probably best to turn the keys in and move out, so that it doesn't become an eviction, so that it doesn't go on their permanent record. So when a background check is run for the next property, that it doesn't become an issue. What about a squatter? So squatters are a little bit different, but we have had that happen in one of our Weinberg units. And so then the property has to go to court and they have to file to take possession of the unit back. So it has happened, but yes, it does take a little bit more time, but it is a possibility that something like that could happen. Okay, terminating a lease. So if the tenant decides at renewal time, or even if it's before their lease is up and they decide that they need to move out, go back through the community rules, go back through the lease, make sure to double check and see what the time frame is that needs to be given. It's typically around 60 days. There are some stipulations that it could be 30 days, but I would always check with the property manager just to double check that and make sure that you're giving the right time frame, the right type of notice, so that you don't get charged with additional fees or extra, rent for each one. If you're given that notice to vacate, you need to make sure that there is a written notice. Did the tenant receive a written notice? Does it spell out all of the information as far as why they're being asked to vacate? What's the time frame? Is there an appeal process? What is the appeal process? How do they appeal, and things like that? All of that needs to be written out. Who do they contact to start that process? And like I said, the notice to vacate is not the true eviction, but if they do not move out by that notice to vacate and do not cure the issue, it could lead to an eviction process. Okay, next question. And you can just answer true and false in the chat. You can't stop paying your rent if the landlord hasn't made the necessary repairs. All right. I see lots and lots of falses. And then I saw that Audrey answered with rent escrow. That is correct. So if you have a landlord that needs to make some repairs and has not done so, you need to go to rent escrow court. You need to file documentation to be able to put your rent into escrow, and so that it shows that you're still paying your rent, but there is a reason that it's going into escrow and that repairs need to be made. And then they will, put in a stipulation as far as time frame and when repairs should be made and things like that. So you can't just stop paying your rent but the rent has to go into escrow until everything is resolved. Okay. So the eviction process, it is a legal process. So the landlord or the property management company has to provide that written notice to vacate. They need to file for the eviction in court. And it could be for things like failure to pay rent. It could be that the tenant is holding over and they're not moving out at the end of their lease, or it is a breach of lease, which could be the violation of terms of the lease or community rules, things like that. The tenant should receive an official court summons to attend the hearing. It is very, very important to attend that hearing. Just want to make sure that it's very important that usually that summons is served in person, but it could also be through the mail, or it could be posted on the individual's front door. It's court, so there's a judge. They're going to hear arguments and evidence from both sides, and then they're going to make a decision. So it could be, in favor of the tenant. It could be in favor of the landlord. There could possibly be a postponement, giving each party or the parties a chance to resolve the issue. If the judge rules in favor of the landlord, they're going to file. The landlord's going to file for that eviction. And then it's going to be scheduled with the sheriff's office. And that's going to vary from county to county as far as the time frame and when it gets scheduled. But then that information is going to go to the tenant so that they know the time frame for when they need to be out of the unit officially. The tenant can appeal the eviction. They should talk with their case manager or support planner if it's a non-payment of rent, to see if they can cure that issue and get rent caught up to date. If it's something that can't be appealed, then on the date of the eviction, the sheriff's going to come to the unit and everyone has to leave. The landlord property management company will remove all the tenant's property. It will be put outside, and the sheriff's officers will, kind of stay there and monitor while all of that is done. And it is the tenant's responsibility for moving their property out of the way, or to figure out how to get it out of the unit. If your client receives that notice to vacate or that eviction, hopefully they will let you know immediately. The tenant has the right to seek legal assistance. Depending on the situation, your client could get assistance from legal aid. It could be a situation where they could get assistance from Disability Rights Maryland. We encourage you and your client to reach out to those resources to see if it's something that they can get assistance for and be represented by an attorney in those situations. If it's if the individual is in the Section 811 program, specifically in the 811 program or the Weinberg program, you can reach out to Wayne Reed for the tenant issue process. He's our contact for tenant issue process with the Department of Health. And if you're not able to get in touch with Wayne, you're welcome to reach out to myself or to Chelsea, see if there is an issue that we can get resolved before it becomes an eviction. And then if it's something that ends up being an eviction, or your client is truly going to vacate the unit, what are the alternate housing options? What is going to happen? Where are they going to live? Where can they go? Is there family? Is there another program? Is there assisted living? Any of those options? What are the next steps for their housing? Okay. So community rules. each property is going to have their own set of community rules, and there's going to be expectations and for the tenant, the household members, and their guests. And again, I'm going to go over one more time that each tenant is responsible for the behaviors of household members and guests. Anybody that has a household member or a guest that breaks one of the community rules, it is a lease violation. So just a heads up. Typically in the lease or even on one of the community rules documentation paperwork, it's going to ask how are they going to be able to reach the tenant, and make sure that there is something by phone, by mail, letters posted to or flyers posted to the unit door. Making sure that the tenants check their phone, check their emails regularly to see if there's any communications coming in. A reasonable accommodation can be requested that those communications be sent to a support planner or a case manager, or an advocate or a family member, so that somebody else is also getting a copy of the communication so that everybody knows what's going on. I know Penny mentioned this earlier in her presentation, making sure that you have that relationship with the landlord. Making sure that you're respectful to the landlord, to the property manager, to maintenance, to your neighbors, to anybody else that's on the property. Conflict resolution. So that's also what we refer to as the tenant issue process. So if you need assistance from our program, if they're a Section 811 or a Weinberg tenant, there's a slide here later on that has contact information for the Department of Health. Right now, it's going to be Wayne Reed. So contact him if there's a situation that the program can assist with. But figuring out what is the grievance and what is the process, and all of that should be spelled out in the community rules. Some properties have tenant relations. Some properties have a resident advisory group to go to. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes tenants don't feel comfortable going to that person or to the property. I've had tenants come directly to me about, different things that are going on, whether it's they have maintenance issues related to cleanliness of the grounds of the apartment, or something's happening with the mailbox, or they, something's happened in one of the common areas, things like that. So looking at what the grievance is and how to resolve it. Is there an issue because a tenant had a relationship with a neighbor and, it went, they were friendly in the past, but maybe something happened. There was, some situation, but, do they feel comfortable approaching them? I've seen some properties have mediators that come in and, bring both tenants in and having that conversation to see, how they're going to handle the situation and resolve the issue peacefully, without it becoming, something, much bigger. If the tenant doesn't know the neighbor, or if the interaction becomes hostile, can you go to the property manager? And that's what my example of using the mediator. Or maybe, if it's two individuals who have case managers, can both case managers and both tenants, sit down and have a conversation about how they're going to resolve the issue. So that it doesn't turn into having to get a mediator, or it doesn't have it to turn into an issue where both tenants are asked to move or someone's asked to move. So knowing that process and how to figure things out. Handling problems with property staff. So, everybody has different personalities, and obviously it's going to be difficult to know that everybody's going to get along 100% of the time. So if it becomes that there is an issue with the actual property manager or maintenance staff, your client may come to you as the case manager or support planner and request your assistance to kind of be that mediator and assist you through that tenant issue. If it becomes a much bigger ordeal, is it something that they're going to need legal representation and figuring out how to handle that? But again, if it is a Section 811 or a Weinberg program, any of the Maryland Partnership for Affordable Housing programs, did you reach out to us? Did you reach out to the program and see if there's assistance that we can provide as well to interact with the property management company to resolve the issue? Probably one of the biggest things that we see coming through is smoking policies. I have yet to see any Section 811 or Weinberg program have allow smoking on the property. So there is a no smoking policy for almost every property, or like I said, on every property that we've dealt with for Section 811 and Weinberg. No smoking on the property, no smoking in the common areas. Some properties will have it marked off where smoking is allowed, but it's typically off of the property. It could be, a block away or so, but it usually is marked. One of the big things that we typically see is individuals using medical marijuana. It does not matter if an individual has medical marijuana use, a card that says that they are allowed to use medical marijuana, it is still prohibited. Even though you have your medical marijuana card, it is not allowed. It is still a non-smoking property. It is not allowed in the unit in common areas. It's not allowed in your car on the property. It's just not allowed. So again, making sure that that's kind of spelled out and everybody understands that policy. Maintenance of the unit. I know that this has probably been something that since the pandemic is kind of going, more people are coming back out and doing maintenance checks and coming into the units for those. They're called, for the Section 811 program, it's a federal inspection. So a lot of property managers are going back into the units and doing those inspections. So they will look for maintenance of the unit. Are your dishes clean? Is there trash on the floor? Is there holes in the wall? Those could be lease violations. It could be that, the property is going to do weekly inspections until, the maintenance of your unit is kept up. The property is not responsible for light bulbs, unless it is the ones that are probably, very high in the ceiling overhead. They're not going to, they will come in and change your filters. And I believe that they do those every 3 months. If you need them done more often, there could be a fee to do those. The property does periodic pest control. They will always be given notice. The tenant can choose to be in the unit or out of the unit when those things happen. When to report maintenance issues. What's the phone number? What's considered an emergency? What's the emergency number and that process. So making sure all of that is documented in the community rules and making sure clients understand the process and how all those things work. Again, just as a reiterate one more time that tenants are responsible for their guests' behavior. All of the guests that come by, visitors, need to follow all of the same community rules as the tenant. If they do not follow those rules, it is possible that the tenant will receive a lease violation. Overnight guests. This is one that we commonly see as an issue. Most properties have a time frame, and it's usually 14 days in a calendar year. So I'm going to repeat that. overnight guests are typically allowed to stay for 14 days in a calendar year. Now, there are, caveats to that. It could be that, you're having family members out of town, and so maybe they're going to stay, a little longer. And it's not 14 overnight stays per person. It includes every single person, collectively. So it's 14 stays. But like I said, if you have family members, that are coming in out of town, have a conversation with the property manager and let them know, the situation, and so that it doesn't turn into a lease violation for having somebody stay. Making, like Christian's here, do they have to register at the rental office? Is there a special place that they have to park? But just letting, the property manager know that those types of things could happen. And that's why somebody is there a little bit longer than, maybe someone, got sick, maybe your client got sick and they need extra help. And so somebody's, staying a little bit longer to help recover, things like that. There are circumstances that property managers are willing to overlook. It becomes an issue when they stay longer than they're allowed, or they start using your client's address as their address and start receiving mail. So that becomes a potential issue and could cause a lease violation. Community rules. There's going to be information in there about trash disposal and recycling. Some properties have trash chutes, some properties have garbage and recycling bins on side the property. Quiet hours. I'm going to tell you most properties are usually around 10 p.m., 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I think the best rule of thumb is, don't do something that you wouldn't want other tenants in the property to do to you. If it's 10 o'clock in the morning and you're, someone's blaring the radio, you wouldn't want to have to hear someone else's music. So, just to, have people be aware of their behaviors and what you would want done to you or not done to you. The property will spell out firearms policy, pet policies. There are rules around having a pet, but there are exceptions to those rules when it comes to assistance and service animals. So a lot of the pet policies do not apply as far as pet fees and things like that. They cannot charge you a pet fee if you have an assistant or service animal. There will be rules spelled out for the supervision of children, play areas, in the common areas, computer lab, things like that. There's always going to be a section in there about the move-in, move-out policy. Some properties are very specific when it comes to a move-in. They may assign timeframes for individuals when they can move in and give them time slots so that it's not an overwhelming process for several people trying to move in and move out of one building at the same time. The move-out policy, as far as, again, that time frame for, how much notice needs to be given, returning security deposits and any fees and things like that. And there will also be a section on using common areas, what's allowed and the rules and different things like that. Some properties have a mailbox room. There could be a common area where all of the mailboxes are. There will be rules related to receiving packages. Will they take bigger packages to your door? Will they take them to the leasing office? And then the leasing office can let you know when the package is there and the hours that they're open for, coming down to pick up your items. Parking rules, things like designated spots. I know Penny talked about that as a reasonable accommodation, but there are rules surrounding, washing your vehicle or not washing your vehicle, not changing the oil, not doing car repairs. There are things like the automobile maintenance and things like that. storing flammable materials. Some properties have a section designated just for storage, and where can you use, where are those storage units and how you can use those. And yes, properties do have a dress code. I can tell you from some of our properties that it was an issue for some in the beginning of not wearing the appropriate attire, making sure that everybody's dressing properly when they go into the leasing office, not sitting in common areas in pajamas, things like that. So yes, all of that information is in those community rules. Keeping the unit clean, making sure that the pathway to your door and to the stairs is clean. Again, making sure that there aren't, dishes and trash laying around so that you're not inviting pests, unwanted pests into a unit and then into the property. There are bed bug policies, and the property will spray for bed bugs as well as for pest control. It's usually around the same time. Yes, properties will do an annual unit inspection, and it's not uncommon. It not only does it include the actual structure of the unit, it could be checking the water heater and the refrigerator and the HVAC and different things like that. Do you have a plan for having somebody assist you with some of those housekeeping services, and do you need help with that, and where can that help come from? And just making sure you're making sure things are clutter free and clean, and hoarding. Is there a program if hoarding becomes an issue, and how is that going to be resolved? Okay. What temperature does BG&E recommend that thermostats be set in the summer? And you can just answer that in the chat. All right. In the 70s have it. Yep, that is the temperature that BG&E recommends your thermostat to be set in the summertime. Again, it's being, conservative, especially if you're working with a utility allowance and making sure that you're staying within budget. During tenant training and even in the community rules, there's going to be information about, the community rules will spell out information as far as the cost to repair certain things. Is there, the fee for, knobs on the oven or the stove. But during tenant training, we encourage case managers to go over how to use, certain things, how to use the thermostat. And I think, I'm not sure if it was Chelsea and I, or it might've been Diane and I at one of the properties, we weren't 100% sure of using the thermostat because it wasn't changing. So we did get maintenance to come in, and there are some thermostats where you have to wait a couple of seconds for the heat to run or the air conditioner to run to kind of reset it so that it knows, and you can only set it in so many increments. But maintenance will typically come in or the property manager will come in and go through that if it's something that you're not sure of. How to change the temperature control in your refrigerator. Using the dishwasher, making sure that, that all the settings work. And I can tell you that if you don't use the dishwasher on a regular basis, sometimes it will kind of need to be looked at by maintenance if it's not run on a regular basis. Oven cleaning. Just a little story real quick. Most of the properties have self-cleaning ovens. Please, please, please have a conversation with your client about self-cleaning ovens and not using any chemicals. Do not use any additional chemicals. We've seen this happen. Somebody was proactive in trying to keep their apartment clean, used some self-cleaning oven or used some oven cleaning product in a self-cleaning oven, ended up having to call the fire department. And then ended up having to pay to get a new oven installed in their unit, because it caught on fire. So have a conversation with your clients about oven cleaning. While we appreciate them being, making sure that everything is clean, you do not need to use additional chemicals for oven cleaning. Garbage disposals. Please, please, please only put soft foods only. Do not, and this is a very short list of do nots. No potato peels, no banana peels, no bones, no grease. All of, especially the grease, it will, clog up that pipe, and it will ruin the garbage disposal. So just some don'ts. If you want a whole list, there's a nice list online of do nots for the garbage disposal if you haven't looked at that list before. Damage to the unit. There are things that could impact the security deposit that gets returned, or what will be returned for the security deposit if there's damage. So like I was telling you the story about the damage to the oven, and that needs to be paid to get a new one. If someone damages the unit, damage to the unit for if emergency responders come in and have to, knock the door down to get in, they could be responsible for repairing that. I've seen reasonable accommodation requests come in for chair rails for hallways, to keep damages done to walls, for individuals that are using chairs to go down the hallway, so that it's not an issue with having to pay for the damages to those. And like I said, in the community rules, it will show you the cost for those items that need to be repaired, and what the cost is. But there is also a list that's going to show you what the owner's responsibility is. So if there is flooding from other apartments, if there's a fire, if property staff damages things in the unit while they're doing maintenance, those are the property's responsibility, and they will have to cover those things. But I would also tell you, when it comes to fires and things like that, it does not hurt to have renter's insurance. And if anybody's interested in information about the Maryland Insurance Administration for selecting renter's insurance, we can send that out as well, just as a side note. Oh, okay. So I had talked about this a little bit ago about the dispute resolution process, or the tenant issue process. We always encourage property managers to go to the tenant first, but sometimes it doesn't get resolved, or sometimes the tenant isn't responsive. So the property manager will come to the case manager. If the case manager is no longer available, if you're not working with the tenant anymore, or the property manager isn't able to get the case manager to be responsive, then they're going to go to the project director, MFP project director, Wayne Reed at the Department of Health. And then Wayne's going to look at some services and some resources that hopefully we can get provided to the individual, so that we can get everybody to stay in their unit and get the issues resolved. And then hopefully it won't come to a notice to vacate. But most of us, I can tell you on this end, with the assistance of Wayne and Chelsea and myself, and Penny, we work really hard to make sure that things like that don't happen, and we can get issues resolved and people can stay in their units. But if you need additional help, Wayne is there to help. I'm here to help. Chelsea's here to help. We can all assist as needed.
Right.
Here is a list of resources, legal resources. If, I think I had mentioned a couple of these, Disability Rights Maryland, Maryland Legal Aid, but there this isn't an inclusive list, but there are different programs out there. I think Penny had talked about expungement. There are certain times of the year that there are free clinics for helping to get assistance with expunging your record. If it's an issue with fair housing, the Fair Housing Action Center of Maryland, do you need help with reasonable accommodations? HUD has resources for those types of things. There's lots of different resources in here. All right. And then contact information. So there's Penny's contact information and contact information for myself. And Penny, do we want to open? I know we ran over, but do you want to open it up for
Yes,
for some
is there any?
questions? If you guys have time and have questions you want to ask. So just raise your hand and I will take you off mute. Let's see.
I only see one.
You see one question? Is that what you said?
I see one in Q&A, but it doesn't look, it was. from
I think
Blake.
I think somebody answered our question in the Q&A.
there.
Yeah, it's not an actual question. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
All right. Oh, did someone else put another question in here? Oh, okay, there we go. All right, and just to kind of go over it again, we will send out a copy of this PowerPoint. If there were additional resources that we spoke of, we can send that out information as well. If you guys have questions, kind of, let us know now. If you think of questions after we finish, send them to us. We are happy to answer those. And if we don't know the answer, we'll get the answer for you and respond.
And two more things. If you think of something that's very, individual specific, reach out to us, because I know sometimes, you have more questions about your particular issue than we have time for on the chat, in the chat here, but please reach out to us. Because it's better to take care of things sooner than later. Especially if you know that there might be an issue that comes up. And if you do need some individual guidance with any of the Consumer Financial Protection Agency information, please don't hesitate to give me a call. I can even come and go over some of that with you if your agency would like that. I do that as well.
So, Millicent, did you want everybody's, like mine and Penny, or just? Okay.
Do we want to say anything about the other two trainings coming up, or just as a reminder?
Sure. So our next training is going to be Wednesday at 10. And that is for reasonable accommodations for case managers. That is our third one. That is going to be, the training is going to be by David Prater from Disability Rights Maryland and Lakeisha Vaughn from Department of Housing and Community Development.
Mm-hmm.
And then our last training is next Monday, May the 15th. And that is staying safe in your home, which is very similar to what I would say like an emergency preparedness type of thing. Oh, and if you have not registered for Wednesday's training, Chelsea put that registration in the link, because you have to register for each training individually, to get the information. So if you haven't already done so, register on using that Zoom link for Wednesdays. And like I said, that is for reasonable accommodations, and it's a really good training. Another plug, and I think we did this last Monday, but just again, another plug, if you don't get training announcements from us, let us know. It's in the bottom of my email, but we can send out that link to get the constant contact reminders and to sign up. MDOD also has a YouTube channel where we post our trainings. So if you're not familiar with that, we can send out that link as well if you want to check out some of the other trainings that we've done in the past. Oh, thank you, Chelsea. There's the constant contact link to register for upcoming trainings and notices. And then, like I said, there's the MDOD YouTube channel, which is on our website as well under housing, where you can take a look at some of the additional trainings that we've done in the past. All
I
right.
think we have one Q&A about
What do we got here?
assistance with the tenant rental assistance.
Rental assistance.
Yeah. Okay.
Rental insurance. So individuals are responsible for paying their own renter's insurance. There is no additional assistance with that. Maryland Insurance Administration has a website where you can look at different plans and packages. So it doesn't recommend the ones that you should get, but it is a list of the ones that are available. And they have a nice chart that you can use to kind of compare plans and packages that are out there. I'm trying to see if I can get the link real quick.
Sometimes if your tenant has a car or vehicle that they're using, they can actually put that additional insurance on that same policy. If not, there definitely are lots of different prices for the rental insurance. So definitely shop around a little bit. Same with cable, by the way. So just thought I'd mention that.
All right. Chelsea just put the link in for our YouTube channel, and I just put the link in for insurance. Oh, Chelsea just did the same thing. And then everyone after this will receive an assessment, and we're using SurveyMonkey. So check your email, check your spam, just in case it goes in there. You need to complete that survey as part of the process to receive your certificate that you completed all 4 trainings and then can move on to shadowing.
I just want to thank Christina and Penny today. You guys did an excellent job facilitating the training. Okay, could you please include links and channels you guys are sharing? They are all in the chat. So all of that information that we just went over is in the chat. So go ahead and please make sure you guys bookmark those links, save them, however it is that you want to keep track of that information. Okay. I appreciate everyone attending. Does anyone have any final questions? All right.
Right.
Thank you. Yep, you're welcome.
No, thanks to everybody that joined us today.
Yeah, much appreciated. Have a good rest of your Monday.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.